Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to make short crust pastry. Short crust pastry is really easy, and you can use it for so many things. It's such a useful thing to know how to make. So I have got my butter, but this isn't really butter. This is a dairy-free spread because my daughter is allergic to cow's milk. So this is what we use, but normal butter, absolutely fine. And then I have got plain flour. Okay, I have also got a jug of cold water. It must be cold, and I've also got some salt. Some salt in here. Okay, right. So first things first. I have got 200 grams of plain flour, which I'm putting into a larger bowl. Please make sure you use a larger one, not a small bowl, because you're going to need to get your hands in and be able to work inside the bowl and lift this flour up as you are doing what is called the rubbing in method. Okay, so next I've got 200 grams of flour. I want half the weight of flour for my butter. So I've got 100 grams of butter in here. If you are using proper butter from cow's milk, it needs to be cold, and you need to try and break it up into pieces, which you can see is really easy with this dairy-free stuff because it's got higher liquid content. But butter might be a little more tricky. Just be patient; it will come apart. So you can see I'm breaking it into slightly smaller pieces. Like so. Right, now we do not use spoons for this. We're going to do what's called rubbing in. So using my fingertips, I'm picking the flour and butter mixture up and rubbing it between them. Do you notice how it is only my fingertips I am using? I do not use the palms of my hands. If you put your fingers onto the palms of your hands, you will notice that the palms of your hands are much warmer than your fingertips. If I used the palms of my hands to do this, what would happen is the butter would melt, and I do not want that to happen. And I'm going to tell you why. Inside flour, there are 2 protein strands. Those protein strands, if they meet a liquid, they will glue themselves together and they will create a longer protein strand called gluten, which I'm sure most of you have heard of. Gluten is wanted to a certain extent in this, however, we don't want lots, because if gluten is allowed to form fully inside pastry, it will make the pastry chewy. I don't want chewy short crust pastry. Short crust pastry gets its name because we want the gluten strands to stay short, and that means it will have a really nice crumbly melt in the mouth texture once it's been cooked. So rubbing it in, what it does is the butter coats each little flour granule. It forms like a protective barrier. And that protective barrier stops the liquid, which will be the water when I put it in, from going inside that flour strand properly, the flour granule properly, which means the gluten can't form. So that's why we do the rubbing in method. And it's also why I want to keep this really cold, because if I allow the butter to melt, it won't stay, it won't form that protective layer. Right, so this is nearly done. If I pick it up, can you see? It's gone like a sandy sort of texture. If you give the bowl a shake, any large lumps will come to the top, which I can see there, so you just quickly work them in. There we go. So I'm lifting it up, I'm allowing it to fall back into the pot. There we go. So next, what I should say is, once you've got it into this texture, you must stop. If you continue, you're going to warm that butter up and it will all clump together. You're not going to end up with the correct texture of your pastry. So next, my water. Okay. I need to add enough water just to bring the pastry together. So I am not ever going to tip the water in. because you can't control the amount you're putting in. So I'm just going to put 2 spoonfuls in, and then I'm using the spoon to stir that in. Cold water again, because you always want to keep the pastry cold. Remember, we need to keep the pastry cold to keep the butter as solid as possible to coat those flour granules. If it melts, it's not going to coat them properly. If it doesn't coat them properly, it will allow the liquid in to form the gluten. Right, so you can see it's starting to clump a little, but not enough. So rather than 2 spoonfuls of water this time, I'm going to cut it down a little, and I'm going to put 1. Using the spoon again, I just stir it. This is where you've got to be patient. If you start pouring loads of water in, you're going to end up with this really horrible porridge mixture. Right, the clumps are a little bigger, but it's not quite there. 1 more spoon. And the amount of water that you use will be dependent upon how warm it is where you're cooking. It will depend upon how accurate your scales are. It will depend upon how good the flour is that you're using. So you can't turn around and look at the amount I'm using and think, you know what, I'm going to need to use exactly the same amount. It may change. Right, I'm happy with that. That's clumping together quite well. So what I do now is I'm going to get my hands in and I'm going to bring it together to form a ball. If there's still quite a lot of very dry mixture at the bottom, then what you could do is, rather than using a spoon now to put the water in, just put your fingers in your water, just do a little sprinkle. This seems to be okay. So all I'm doing now, see, I'm going around the ball, with the ball of pastry, just to pick up those last bits. Right, there we are. Right, what we must not do now is play around with this. It is not Play-Doh, it's not plasticine. If you play around with this, you're going to warm it up. And as I've already said, if you allow the butter inside to warm up too much, it will melt away from those flour granules that we wanted it to coat, and it will let the gluten form. We don't want that. If you're going to use this today, it needs to go in the fridge to rest for at least 30 minutes. So you could pop it into a clean bag, a food bag, and into your fridge just to rest for 30 minutes. And that allows the butter to re-solidify really nicely, and you'll find it much easier to work with. I'm not going to be using this today, so I'm putting it into a food bag. I'm going to seal it up, and then I'm going to put it into my freezer. And then when I'm ready to use it next weekend, I can get it out to defrost in my fridge overnight, and I can continue to use it from that step. Okay, thank you.